Okay, this is a book review. The name of the book is The Renaissance by Will Durant. It really should be called The Italian Renaissance because virtually the entire book was about the Italian part of the Renaissance. Okay, Will Durant is a very good historian. He wrote history of the entire history of the world. I actually went through all of them years ago because I was recently working on my book, The Best Christian Art. I just listened to this in my car, the Italian Renaissance, because it gets me thinking about stuff. And Will Durant, here's Will Durant with his wife, Ariel, and he was a great historian. And his wife was actually a decent historian as well. He's smart. He says a lot of good things. What do I think is his weakness? He's a little bit too much in love with the French, okay? He loved Voltaire. He thought Voltaire was the greatest writer who ever lived. And yes, Voltaire was very funny, very clever. That's all true. But the net result of Voltaire's philosophy was destructive. It led to the destruction of France, okay? Led to the guillotine, okay? That's bad, all right? So you can like somebody and enjoy them, but to think that they're good is different. What is their net influence? But be that as it may, talking about the Italian Renaissance, he also loved the Italian Renaissance, and it's obviously a magnificent time in the history of the world. But here's some quotes of Will Durant, just to get a sense of how smart he is. Because, he is actually real smart. He says, civilization is a fragile bungalow, precariously poised on the edge of a big volcano of barbarism. And that is the truth. Well, we take it for granted to have civilization. Most countries in the history of the world have not been civilized. They've been brutal, barbaric tyrannies, okay? And if you also get outside of civilized areas, you will see a lot of communities are very bad, very violent. And that's another thing, too. I think, women don't even realize how good they had it in the United States the last 50 years. And now all this modern craziness is putting an end to that. They won't be free to walk down the streets in the future because there's so much crime like it is now happening in Europe. Look at what's happening in Europe. It's a terrible, sad destruction of Western civilization. Okay, Will Durant continues. There's another quote by him. Well, actually, one thing I meant to get to was he says that civilization is for the few. And I actually think that is true. What he's getting at is very few people have an interest in art, literature, and philosophy and history, and very few read about it and discuss it. So in order for civilization to continue, it has to be transmitted to the youth, okay? So what does he say? He says, education is the transmission of civilization. The best a man can do is to learn about the good things in civilization and try to transmit this knowledge to the next generation. Civilization is not inherited. It has to be learned. If the transmission of civilization knowledge should be interrupted, civilization would die and we would be savages again. Okay, and that's pretty much true. Just look at, popular media, popular, movies and stuff. It's a descent into barbarism. Just a lot of action and violence and very little interiority, thinking, and human relationships, okay? And we're moving into atheistic Darwinism, which is a disaster for society. Okay, more of just a sense of, Will Durant. The tragedy of life is that it gives us wisdom only after it has stolen our youth. Yeah, that's about right. I didn't become smart till I was an old guy. It would have helped me a lot if I had been smart when I was a young guy. Okay. The principle of family is mutual aid, but the principle of society is competition. Yeah, and like Aristotle had said the same thing. The design of the family is for satisfaction of a person's needs. And that's the other thing too. A lot of a person's happiness comes from their family. So this modern idea of, women have been totally tricked into thinking, oh, your happiness will come from your job. Yeah, right. Your job doesn't care about you. They'll fire you in 2 seconds. And you're just, a worker who's supposed to shut up and obey over there. Whereas your family, the mama's the queen of the family. Okay, let's see. What does he say next? He says, Florence during the Renaissance was the Athens of Italy. The golden age of Florentine art began with the return of Cosimo Medici to Florence from exile. Yeah, the great Cosimo Medici, the great Medici family, okay? Yeah, they were wealthy, one of the wealthiest families in the world. But you know what? They did good things with it. They supported all these wonderful painters. They supported all these wonderful scholars who were translating the books from ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and they did a lot of good things. They made schools and other charity services to the public around them. Partly was their own sense of usury being considered a sin, and they were trying to make up for it, with good deeds. But they did do a lot of good deeds. Okay, so the great Cosimo Medici, and then his son was great as well, Lorenzo the Magnificent. Okay, and they supported great artists like, look at Sandro Botticelli. Him and Rogier van der Weyden are the two greatest artists of the 1400s. Okay. He continues, to give life meaning, one must have a purpose larger than self. Okay. And like I said, you can't get away from religion. You can't. You can have a purpose without religion, and some really smart people can find a clear path, and like Rousseau would be like that, and Diderot, the French guys, the French philosophes, okay? But the average person can't do that. For the average person, religion is their metaphysics, okay? And that was a quote, by the way, of Schopenhauer. Religion is the metaphysics of the masses. Okay, now here's Will Durant quote again. The men who can manage money manage all. That's how it is in the modern world. The men who can manage men manage those who can only manage things. Yep, those business skills are valuable as well. And we kind of see that. And that's what I'm trying to say. The richest guy in the world, like Cosimo Medici, he at least was doing good things. And the Vatican was rich and it was doing good things. It was producing magnificent art, magnificent buildings, cathedrals for worship, and it's funding all these scholars. Okay, Christianity is great at funding scholarship, and it big time. Look at going back to the 1200s. Aquinas, Aristotelianism, and Charlemagne and Alcuin. It does wonderful things for education. It's very pro-education. Okay, Will Durant continues. A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within. The essential causes of Rome's decline lay in her people, her morals, her class struggle, her falling trade, bureaucratic despotism, stifling taxes, consuming wars, and I would add the lead in the pipes making people stupid, plumbism. Okay, he says the political machine triumphs because it is a united minority acting against a divided majority. Okay. And that was the old Roman game, divide and conquer. Get all the little city-states fighting with each other, and then Rome would just pick them off one by one and control them all. Okay, Will Durant continues. The time when you need to do something is when no one else is willing to do it. When people are saying it can't be done. Yeah, that's why I'm trying to teach civilization and health and nutrition on the internet, because there's not many people trying to do it. There's a few. There's some really good ones, but there's not as many as there should be. The voice of truth in the world of nutrition and health is dominated on the internet about 1,000 to 1. Okay, Will Durant continues. Raphael was the best painter to show the harmony between paganism and Christianity. Michelangelo frightens us. Terribilità. Leonardo da Vinci puzzles us. By the way, I think Leonardo da Vinci sucks. Okay, I recently made this book. You can I've shown pictures of it. Best Christian art, and there's painting after sculpture, magnificent things done by Michelangelo. Michelangelo was the greatest genius ever in the history of art. Okay, Leonardo da Vinci. What did he do? Name one good painting. Everybody talks about the Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa sucks. It's an ugly painting of a fat lady. Okay, and then they talk about his painting of the Last Supper. Okay, he made a painting of the Last Supper. It's a decent painting, but there's nothing special about that. I don't think anybody wants that on the wall in their dorm room, okay? And then what else did he do? Then he really sort of had a resentment of Christianity. And you ever seen his painting, Madonna of the Rocks, where her hand is almost like a claw above the head of baby Jesus? It's disgusting. It's crap, okay? Leonardo da Vinci's totally overrated, and I think it's because the modern world is trying to celebrate homosexuality, so that they'll try to celebrate Leonardo da Vinci like he's this great, great artist. He could draw well, yes, he could draw really well, but what I'm trying to say is his overall contribution to the history of the art in terms of quality art is very small. Okay, it's nothing compared to Michelangelo and Raphael. He doesn't have a single great painting, and he didn't do sculpture, and he doesn't have any great architecture, okay? He's a minor player compared to Michelangelo and Raphael. Raphael has the painting of the School of Athens, and that is one of the all-time greatest paintings. Okay, it's an awesome painting. I have a copy of both the Sistine Chapel and the School of Athens, big posters on the wall in my bathroom because they inspire me every day to see that. Okay, and Raphael had a lot of other great paintings too. He did the wonderful portrait of Pope Julius when Pope Julius had a beard as an old guy. He was wearing a beard that he wasn't going to shave off until the French had been driven out of Italy. Okay, he was a patriotic old bastard. Okay, good for him. He fought to preserve the Vatican, the faith. I love Pope Julius. Okay, what else? Raphael had a very nice painting of Pope Leo. And Pope Leo, of course, was the Pope during Martin Luther's beginning of the Reformation. And Pope Leo screwed up. He underestimated Martin Luther. Yes, that's all true. And he was a big fatso. Yes, that's all true. But what I like about Pope Leo, he was a great patron of the art. He gave tons and tons of money to fund all these scholars for all their scholarship work, studying the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the Bible, for studying also the great artists, great poets. He was a tremendous benefactor of the arts, okay? And that's part of the civilizing effect that the Catholic Church had on the world, a largely barbaric world at that time. Okay, let's see. So Raphael did a great portrait of him. He also did some great Madonnas. I love the Sistine Madonna, the Drought of the Fishes, and he's got other good stuff. Okay, Via Dolorosa painting is great as well. All right, and by the way, that's a trick that I always do when I'm writing a book or if I'm preparing a big talk. I'll always listen to audiobooks in the car that somehow are related to it, and they just activate my brain to understand it better, think about it better, and it's enjoyable. It all goes together. And I actually think that's one of the big differences between my father and myself. My father would sort of read randomly for entertainment, and he was a psychiatrist, so he's always having conversations with people, and he did have some smart friends who he would talk to once in a while. So his reading was something to converse with his friends and maybe with his patients sometimes, but he didn't read in a fixed block way on a subject at a time like I do. Like I wanted to make a history of art, so I reviewed a bunch of stuff from Greece, Rome, Italian Renaissance, and the Victorian Renaissance or Catholic Revival of the 1800s. So I read in blocks to master a subject at the moment, and I think that's a better way to read because then it sticks with me and I do some project with it. Okay, more by Will Durant. He says, the Italian language is the triumph of the vowel over the consonant. Vowels are much more musical than consonants because a singer can hold them. And here's a typical beautiful name of an Italian scholar, Pico della Mirandola. And you know, how musical is that? The Italians have got a lot of that. You know, Italians are real fun, warm, nice people. As far as what's the most beautiful language in the world, well, certainly Italian and French are right up there. Okay, which one's more beautiful? I guess it depends. The Italian Renaissance had more geniuses than Periclean Athens, was another quote by Will Durant. Florence was the art school of the world. Florence was seen as a perpetuation of the grandeur that was Rome. Okay, yeah, so that's how you learn stuff. You know, all these artists who wanted to get good, they would travel to Florence and they would hang around with Michelangelo, or they would, you know, be in, you know, Michelangelo, when he was young, he was discovered by Lorenzo the Magnificent Medici, who just let him live at his place and funded him and, you know, got him access to the other artists around there. I think it was Perugino or something, and Pico della Mirandola. And so Michelangelo got to train with these great artists from a young age, and that's what you should do with any person who shows exceptional talent or interest in something, is get them around good mentors. And then you basically learn how to imitate the mentor, and then eventually you add your own little creative twist to it and your own function as a mature, independent, creative artist. Giotto was one of the founding fathers. I think it was a chapel arena where he made a whole bunch of paintings about the life of Christ, and basically they look like the first comic book. And that's a great thing about the walls of a Catholic church, is that most of the people, you know, since the beginning of time, and still nowadays, they're illiterates. Nowadays, you would call them functional illiterates. They know how to read, but they don't read. And I can tell you, I know lots of doctors, and almost none of them reads almost anything, okay? They always say they're busy. They're busy, and they are busy. Most doctors are workaholics, kind of worked into the ground by the system, and then their time off, they just want to spend some time with their family or do whatever their hobby is, and it usually is not reading. And I only say that because I'm making the point that the number of people who are actually reading books is quite small, and that's not good for society. All right, so anyways, the Catholic Church had to educate people in the story of Christianity, and that was done with all these painters. So the painters were in very high demand, and Giotto was sort of the transition figure from the ancient Byzantine style. Everything is flat with no three-dimensionality and is sort of symbolic, iconic, and kind of boring. So Giotto making his comic book character type three-dimensional illustrations in the chapel arena was a big step for artists to come see that. And then the next step up in terms of being able to portray three-dimensionality and emotion came from the art of Masaccio. And then the next great leap was just the superstar, Sandro Botticelli in the 1400s. And the other guys were good too, Perugino, Domenico Ghirlandaio, and those other ones. But, Sandro Botticelli is one of the greatest of all time. He's awesome. Okay, Will Durant continues. Gothic culture creates the need for sculptures outside and paintings inside and stained glass windows. Yeah, a lot of these statuary are great. We always talk about, Michelangelo's Pietà, but, if you just look at all the little statues on the roof of St. Peter's Basilica and a lot of all that stuff that Bernini did, he was magnificent, okay? He's been called the Michelangelo of the 1600s. Michelangelo lived in the 1500s. Will Durant. There is no significant example in history before our time of a society successfully maintaining moral life without the aid of religion. Yeah, and America's losing its morality because it's losing its religion. Okay, I gotta get the page to go here. All right, this is the last page of slides here. So more quotes by Will Durant. Boys should be taught by men. Girls should be taught by women. I actually agree with that to a certain point. I think up until they hit puberty, boys can be raised only by their mommies, and that's fine. But I think, in all societies, the boys get muscular and strong by about, 7th, 8th grade, and then they should go and have, be instructed by men. That's the way it works, I think, in all previous societies. And I also think that's why women have small shoulders. Physically, they're kind of weak compared to a man. They got just enough strength to control a boy up until about 6th grade. I remember that because my mom kicked my ass when I was in 6th grade, but she couldn't in 7th grade. And so what I'm trying to say is a woman is strong enough to handle her sons up until they hit puberty. Then, in all societies, they go with the men. And because you learn stuff from a guy, you don't learn from a woman. From your mom, you get unconditional love. And thank God for that. We all need that. Sometimes we're down, sometimes we're sad. And thank God for the love of a mother. Okay? But you also need to hear from a father whose love is more conditional. And he basically says, you better work hard, you better be disciplined, you better develop a skill, or you're going to be a homeless, poor person. Okay? Because there's nothing intrinsically useful or attractive about a man in comparison with a woman. She's got reproductive capacity. We like women far more than women like us. Okay, so a woman could be as stupid as a chimpanzee and still fit into society just fine and get a husband and live her life, okay? She never really has to open a book if she doesn't want to her whole life. Whereas a guy, no one wants to support a guy. No one's going to help him. If he can't, work and stuff, he's screwed, all right? And I can also tell you, how does a man think about a woman? When you think about she might be the one for me, my future wife, you put him on a pedestal. And a man basically makes himself a servant, almost a slave of his woman if he wants to marry her. He's a good man. That's kind of normal to do that. And that's why men are so fussy about the woman should never cheat on him, because his attitude is, well, look, I'll do anything for you, but just, give me children and proof of paternity. And in exchange, I'll do anything for you. That's kind of how it works. And this idea that men and women are equal and the same is ridiculous. The whole dynamic is totally different for the man and the woman. She's the one who gets pregnant. She's the one who has the baby. She's the one who nurses the baby. She's the one who's got that female intuition, emotional sense to understand children and kids. When I was growing up, I never held a baby. Practically, almost never. I never wanted to. I'm like, what is it, going to piss on me? I don't want to hold a baby. Why would I want to hold a baby? It didn't seem natural until I had my own kids. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's my kid. I got to help out with my kid. Whereas the women are always talking about babies, hanging around with the other women. Okay, well anyway, so he says boys should be taught by men, girls should be taught by women. And the reason that's relevant is I think our society is so overly feminized. All these poor boys have to go to a school where their teacher's a female, and she tries to make them behave like a little girl. And girls are a lot more quiet, and they sit still better than boys. So the poor guy is just acting like a normal guy, joking around, moving around. He gets labeled as hyperactive, and all of a sudden they start drugging him with amphetamines, okay? Okay, anyways. All right, continuing. Quotes by Will Durant. Civilization is of the few and for the few. He also says the soul of a civilization is its religion. And when the religion dies, the faith dies, so does that civilization. Okay, Will Durant continues. All Western civilization is dying. And by the way, during this book, he goes through all the paintings of Raphael. He goes through all the paintings of Michelangelo and all the paintings, not all of them, but most of the famous great ones. I'm not showing any paintings in this lecture because I've given tons of lectures about art, including the Renaissance, and I'm going to be giving more lectures about art in the Renaissance very soon, so I don't want to bore you with all the paintings here. I will show them in other lectures. I simply just giving you a sense of Will Durant, why I do think he's very much worth reading. I really enjoy his historical books, and they're long. I mean, I don't remember how many hours it was, probably something like about 14 hours. I listened to it for like at least 2 weeks all day in the car. All right, Will Durant continues, Stoicism leads not away from religion, but towards religion. Oh, he has a great quote, too. He says, great civilizations are born Stoic and they die Epicurean. And God, it's always scary because all these things match the United States. Okay, so Will Durant continues, all Western civilization is dying because it has lost the religious basis of its moral code. We are living in a post-Christian era. If we examine our memories, we shall find what stirred us in our native faith was not a body of doctrine, but the ethics and story of Christ. The challenge to behave as if all men were brothers, and the example of life, of his life, that lived up to this seemingly impossible ideal. It is difficult to imagine how anyone could improve upon this outline of a faith for the modern soul. Through all the adventures of the mind, among philosophies and creeds, the figure of Christ remains the most appealing in history. That's important, okay? Because it's true. We do not need so much a new religion as we do a return to the old one in its essentials and in its simplicity. All over the world, it has been found easy to interest people in Christ, but hard to keep them for the theological components of Christianity. Yeah, and everybody's sick of doctrine. We don't care about doctrine, okay? The important stuff is, 10 commandments, be nice to each other, love thy neighbor, forgive each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt. That kind of stuff, okay? Nobody cares about, whether the communion wafer is necessary or represents the true body of Christ or is merely the symbolic body of Christ. Who gives a rat's ass, okay? All right, another quote for Will Durant. For all the world will hear gladly the story of a man who died that there might be goodwill amongst men. So Will Durant, he lived from 1885 to 1981, almost basically 100 years, 96 years. Okay, and he did a great job summarizing the history of the world. So anyways, hope that was interesting and useful.